Good morning, traders, and welcome to the Bookmap Pro Trader webinar. Actually, this is recordings here. Today we have the Pro Trader webinar series with Brent Kachuba from Spot Gamma. You may have heard of him. He's futures and stocks and options, of course, a trader. He's going to go over futures and stocks. Brent has a long history here, trading equities and derivatives, 20 years. B of A, Credit Suisse, in an equities broker, in algorithmic sales and trading. Following that, he was in institutional sales for Wolverine, representing their electronic derivatives trading platform. Currently, Brent trades some proprietary strategies and runs spotgamma.com, which publishes various metrics on options data. Various metrics, many metrics, as you will probably see here. Here's Brent's contact information, or Spot Gamma's contact information. If you are interested in this, you have the website from the Bookmap Marketplace here. You will get access to, I'll show you this in the Bookmap Marketplace. You get access to the hero indicator, also their levels. You have their email here, sg@spotgamma, Twitter handle, and then also there's special offering here. If you want to click on this link, I will put this into the chat for you guys so that you have it. But let me just show you the Bookmap Marketplace really quickly here so that you understand what this indicator is in a little more depth here. So we'll go to the Bookmap Marketplace. Okay. And go up here, go to the home page. And here it is right in the top left corner here. Yeah, you can read about it here. There's a few different products they have in here. The hero level is, which is hedge impact real-time options, and also some options gamma levels, etc. So without further ado, though, let's just turn it right over to Brent and let him take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. How you doing?
Doing well. So yeah, looking forward as always to what you're going to have here in the toy chest here to go through some of these magical options levels here.
Yeah. So every time we get a market like this, it's I forget what movie it's from. It's always that I love the smell of napalm in the morning. I love these markets when they finally move, So we're gonna cover the hero indicator and just give everyone a quick overview of that. Because the market is so active, excuse me, I wanted to leave a little more time kind of at the end to show the live hero screen. We could talk about that. I have a few stocks loaded up, take some questions on that. But what we're gonna do quickly is just touch base on Spot Gamma, what hero is, and then I have some data now, which is new. So even if you're sort of used to my hero spiel, I actually have some great data that shows how the options print, and that invokes stock volume, and then you can see the stock move along with that. So it's pretty neat. So just to get a quick idea of who we are at Spot Gamma, we produce options based levels for trading stocks and futures. So we analyze the options market, and from that we produce levels at which we think hedging flow, that is bank market maker hedging flow, will show up around those options levels. And then we also predict volatility, which is based on the options position as well. So what we mean by that, if you look at today's current market, it's really very volatile. We predicted that if the market broke basically 44.50, 44.25, somewhere in that area last week, that volatility would really pick up substantially. And you can compare that to some of the notes we put out 2 weeks ago, where we said, look, nothing's going on, might as well finish up your Labor Day vacation. So the volatility forecasting, I think, is really helpful in combination with some of the major levels. And kind of as an incident, just to note, we have 43.70 in SPX is the level we put out this morning. I can show you that on the chart as a major kind of inflection point, which is what the market is trying to digest at the moment. So as we sort of move ahead, again, I just talked about these major levels. In your Bookmap system, you can use Cloud Notes and automatically load those levels in. So each morning, around 3 a.m., these levels update, and they show where we see the biggest inflection points that are support and resistance in the market, based again on those options positions and the SPX and the SPY if you're looking at futures. So let's talk quickly about the hero indicator. So the hero indicator is something that we've produced along with Bookmap as a partner, that we read all the options trades in real time. So it's the entire options trade feed, right? All the bids and offers and quotes. And we figure out what are the biggest and most important trades taking place. And we publish a stream of those trades on the Bookmap screen. And our belief here is that when large options trades are taking place, that invokes dealer hedging or market making hedging. And that hedging flow can move stocks and or futures around. And we have a bunch of data to back up that statement. So HERO simply stands for, as Bruce mentioned earlier, the hedging impact of real-time options. So again, as I just sort of noted, the big options trades leads to hedging flows, and those hedging flows we believe are the most consistent source of flow in the market when you're talking about stock and options. And the reason we believe is because the options market is growing. There's a lot of data out. For example, if you go over to Zero Hedge, you can poke around for this chart. I believe I put it on Twitter as well. But the options market has grown again in size. It's record volumes in the options market, and liquidity in the underlying in the ES and in equities has been very flat. So if you have more options flow, you have more hedging flow, which in turn indicates that the options market could control, or the hedging flows could have more of an impact on the underlying stock and the way that they move. So not only is the options market larger, equaling more hedging flows, but if you think about market making flow in general, they're trading their gamma, right? They're constantly having to rebalance their book. So if you were to compare hedging flows of like a big pension fund, every quarter they come in, they rebalance, and then they're done trading, right? But the market makers, they rebalance, at Friday's close, they got to rebalance again on the open. If the market moves a bunch intraday, they got to keep trading. So that hedging flow is persistent. It's always there. And so that is why we say it's the largest, most consistent flow. Obviously, if one big hedge fund comes in or a giant pension fund comes in, they may move the market for an afternoon, right? But the market making flow is going to show right back up the following day. Just a basic overview of how delta hedging works. If a trader, be it retail or some other fund, buys a call, that means that they're buying from a market maker or dealer. That means the dealer short the call, and they would need to buy stock as a hedge, right? So these are the underlying basics of order flow and how we think that these things can impact the stock. So when you're looking at the hero indicator and the readings, what we're showing you is the hypothetical position that the dealer has to hedge. So if the hero reading is positive, that means that market maker would need to possibly offset, the risk that they have and buy stock. So again, if the hero reading is positive, it means that the traders are buying calls or selling puts, which means that a market maker would have to buy stock, as you can see on this table. There's really two ways, as we mentioned before, that the hero indicator is useful. One, it'll help you spot large intraday trades. So did a really big whale come in and just sweep the book, sweep all the options book and say AMC. So that's that on-screen immediate impact of a trade. We think we do a great job of highlighting and letting people know when a trade took place. The other thing that's interesting is that you can use the hedging impact tool, which we show the cumulative flow over the whole day. So you could tell at the end of the day, okay, look, people were really buying a lot of puts today or selling a lot of calls or whatever it may be. And that could lead to end of day hedging, right? If the hedging flow is very negative through the day, then maybe market makers have to sell into the close to hedge their book. So you can figure out, get some insights on which way people are leaning, or dealers are leaning, excuse me. And then kind of the third obvious one is sentiment, right? If you know everyone's buying calls, the hero indicator will be very positive, and that can give you some information, right? That maybe is just setting up for a gamma squeeze, for example. Or look, like today in the S&P, we'll take a look at the indicator and see are people buying puts, right? Can we figure that out here? And how's that going to help me estimate what the market's going to do? Not necessarily today, but tomorrow and the next day, right? So that sentiment indicator is an important thing to realize as well. So the way that the hero indicator works, we have two ways of showing you the flow. One is what we call the on-chart indicator, and there's these small little triangles, and the triangles can show up with every single option trade that takes place. So for the S&P or Apple, there's millions of trades that take place every single day, millions of contracts that trade every single day, and we show you the size of that trade as indicated on screen. The second way is this rolling sum that is at the bottom of the screen here. The rolling indicator is the rolling sum of all the individual trades, so the individual triangles, so to speak, that take place on the day. So the cumulative indicator is what you would look at to see, okay, what is the flow over the day, over the last hour, et cetera. So we try to contextualize the information for you in a few different ways. It's important to note that this is all configurable, right? All the little triangle icons, everything that you see on my screen or in any of these pictures, you could change the color, the size, the shape, not the shape, but the color and the size of the triangles, or simply remove those from your chart and just view the cumulative indicator. So you have some ability to overlay this information onto your custom bookmap setup. I know a lot of people are very particular about the information they're seeing, and we want to sort of embed ourselves alongside of your existing setup and not sort of force you into a certain view. So let's take a quick example of the way that the hero indicator would work. In this case here, we're looking at GameStop. This chart is from a few weeks ago, but what you'll see here is the stock moves higher, and then out of the blue here, you see suddenly this hero indicator drops very sharply. So this sharp drop is telling us that negative delta trades hit the market. Now, negative delta trades has to be either somebody sold calls or they bought puts. And the reason that we look at delta is, for those of you who are a bit new to options trading, to hedge an options trade, you would monitor the delta of that options trade. The delta is telling us the number of shares that need to be bought or sold in order to neutralize the directional risk of an option. So if Bruce was to buy a put from me, if I'm the market maker, Bruce buys a put, I'm now short a put as a market maker, and I need to hedge that directional risk, right? So the way that I do that is I look at what the options delta is. We have trading systems that tell us that. And so, for example, if the delta of that option is a 50, that means that I need to buy 50 shares of stock for every single option that Bruce bought, for every single put option that Bruce bought. So you can see that if Bruce bought 10,000 puts, he likes to really sling those trades around, and I need to buy 50 shares for every put that he bought, and so you could see how that could impact or have a major force or influence on the way stock moves. So in this case, again, right off the top of the stock, huge bearish flow comes into the market on the option side, and you can see how sharply the stock drops, right? So the information here to me is very valuable in that I know that dealers likely will need to sell here, but I also know that if the stock suddenly drops, it's a $3 drop, you might be looking for news, right? You might be on your Discord chat or on your message board saying, why did the stock just drop, $3, $4, $5? Oh, huge options trade, right? No news, nothing else out there. It's an options trade. So that gives me this information now that if I wanted to look into buying the dip after this trade, I also have a little more confidence in that because I know I have information as to why the stock declined in the first place, right? So there's different dynamics of how you want to look at this, the options flow and the hero indicator, and what you may draw or glean from that.
Can you go back to that one for just a moment, if I can interrupt you here? So I know that I can't quite read it in the image there, but some of the red triangles there, because there's quite a few green triangles,
Yeah,
but the red ones, can you explain a little bit more about that?
sure. So the green triangle is a positive delta trade, and the red triangle is a negative delta trade. So if I flip back to this original chart here, a positive delta trade is if someone buys a call or sells a put. So either of those two, buy, call, sell, put, those would invoke a green triangle or cause us to place a green triangle. And if somebody sells a call or buys a put, that's a negative delta triangle, right? Ostensibly a bet that the market is not going to go up, and that would be a red triangle. So back on this chart here, you'll notice that there's green and red triangles, but inside of the chart, and I apologize you can't read this, is a number. And the number tells us the size of the trade that took place. So the bigger the number, the larger the size. So that's why the cumulative indicator can be helpful, because as you note, there's a bunch of green triangles here too. And so you say, well, it's not simply the number of triangles that you're seeing, it's actually the total delta, right? So what I mean by that is you could have 50 green triangles here that all have, let's say, a 10 in them, right? But then you get one red triangle that has a minus 10,000, and your net flow from that period is going to be minus 10,000 basically, right? Because those green trades, the green triangle trades, are so small. So, in other words, all day long, there's a lot of small retail trades, for example, people buying through Robinhood, they'll buy a one lot call, et cetera, et cetera. But then all of a sudden at 12 o'clock, right, Bridgewater or some massive hedge fund comes in and buys 100,000 puts. Well, all those little retail trades don't matter anything if Bridgewater comes in and buys 100,000 puts, right? So that's why the size of the trade And this cumulative indicator is helpful because yes, you can see on screen the little the triangles, which are very useful for placing, a specific trade. But you also need to be cognizant of how big the trade is, right? The delta size, so to speak.
Yeah, that's excellent. Just a note too that you can also filter for those on chart.
Exactly.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, so in the visual settings, you could use this slider, and actually, I think we just updated this. I need to update the slide here. I apologize for that. But you can set the filter to say only show me trades that are above a certain size, so that your on-screen indicator here will just show you, and you can see on my screen, I'll demonstrate this. Just show me the big trades of the day, right? That's all I really want to see as a triangle on the screen. Because if you view every single trade, particularly like Apple or Spiders, I mean, you're looking at thousands of trades. It can be a little overwhelming. It's pretty fascinating. So let's show how this works in the ES and the NASDAQ as well. Now, one of the things that's key to note about the way that we look at the ES and the NASDAQ, we not only monitor the SPX and the NDX, those are the index options, but we also monitor the spiders and the Qs. And that's really important because the Qs, if you just look at the NASDAQ, the Qs is a much larger options position than in the NDX index. So you really need to be aware of the QQ options trading. But the same thing goes for the S&P flow. Spiders is at or larger at the moment in terms of options flow than SPX index. So if you're not watching both, you're missing literally half of the picture, if not more. So when you look at ES or NQ in the hero indicator, you're seeing both the index and the ETF flow combined on your chart. So here's a great example. This one actually, we were giving a live demo back then of this of this trade, I believe, where you could see that there's just this giant print that takes place, right? This is somebody came in here and bought a giant call position, or they sold a huge number of puts, and that is why the hero indicator jumps. And along with that, right off of this bottom, you can see that there's a really big 20 handle move in the futures, right? So this is the kind of on screen. I mean, this is a wonderful indication here of the kind of flow that you will see. And oftentimes what you'll also see is that there will be a fade sometimes after these moves take place. So maybe you missed the initial move, but if you know, okay, market spiked because of this big call trade, now I know I could fade that, right? It's not because the Fed just came out and said that they're lowering interest rates or some piece of news I missed. Huge options trade, maybe I want to fade that move as opposed to try to run with it, right? So again, there's multiple different ways to try to play the indications. In terms of the longer view on the options order flow, in this case, the market going into this day was a little bit weak, right? And what we saw is every single dip that came, you could see that the hero indicator would have more bullish flow step in. And so that gave confidence to buy dips here because the options flow was positive all day, which indicated that call buyers were coming in. And then not only that, it also indicated that there may be quite a large amount of demand into the close because market makers really need to hedge at the close, hedge their position into the close, right? If people are buying options, buying calls all day, then market makers may need to buy some futures to sort of shore up their risk at the end of the day. And that goes, double for a day like on Friday, for example, where there's a lot of put flow coming into the market. Market makers need to make sure that they're hedged going into the close. That 4 o'clock, 4:15 close is really important to make sure their risk is squared away. So that's oftentimes what you can see in the last 10 minutes of the day, just really, gappy, big, 10, 15, 20 handle move in futures because look, you got to get your risk right before the weekend or before the end of the day.
A question on that, Brent. This might be options expiration. I'm not sure, but when you see these types of huge accumulation on the options, do you typically see like a 2 or 3 day run to the upside after this?
Yeah, I think it's situational, really. Particularly in the call side, I think that's something that you could say is true. On the put side, it's a little more difficult to say because the put side exhausts very quickly, if that makes sense. So again, we're really in the process of gathering lots of data, and we're going to be able to start running some of these regressions where we say, okay, when the hero indicator is very positive one day, what happens the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days, and can we draw correlations from that? But a lot of times, I think in the put side, we can see exhaustion when it's a really negative day. So that can actually indicate a flip or maybe a positive day in the next day. But you can also see the bullish accumulations will happen on several days in a row, and that can be an indication that there's some more stabilization in the market in a longer term bull run. So sort of recap, I think on the bullish side, you can extrapolate a few days out. On the put side or the bearish side, it's a little bit harder to sort of have that view several days out, if that makes sense.
Yep. Thank you.
Sure. This works the same way on the put side as we were just talking about. What's interesting here is that one of the Fed governors came out at this time. I don't believe this is actually Powell. I think this was another meeting, and they had mentioned something that the market initially took negative or didn't. That was not. I think the market was unsure of whether it was positive or negative. Oftentimes the Fed officials will say something and the market digests it very quickly, and then the market bounces, right? So maybe we get initial drawdown off the headline reading algos, and then it reverts, right? But in this case, you can see that the put buyers really came in off of that news, right? And we could tell it because this cumulative indicator really drops lower. I should note too, in this picture, I changed the color of the on-screen triangles to just be gray, just as another way so that you can see the triangles. These are the same triangles that you see, here when they're red and green. It's just you could change the color to be gray. It's a little easier on the eyes sometimes. So at any rate, the put flow came in. So that told me that the market is not looking favorably upon this news, right? So while normally after those Fed, comments, I will play a mean reversion trade, right? Because the put flow built so steadily, that signaled to me, look, you don't want to try to buy this dip, right? You want to look to actually either stay short or stay out of the way of whatever may be coming. What's also interesting to know about this too is that you could see here at the end of the day, right before 5 o'clock, we talked about having hedging flow into the close that needs to adjust, and that's exactly what happened here. We moved from 4,200 down to 4,175 in the matter of just a few minutes, based on that hedge adjustment. This is a screenshot from yesterday, and this kind of leads me into some of the new information for those of you who are been using the Hero system for a while. What we've actually seen, which has been really fascinating, particularly a few days, is that we're getting some insights into the type of flow that's coming into the market. And normally what people say is, hey, the Hero indicator was positive, but the market went down. What's up with that, right? Or vice versa. And what's been really fascinating to watch, we put a few different pieces of our information together, is there's clearly volatility trades that are taking place, and we're able to pick those up. So what I mean by that is, if you are a volatility trader, you are going to buy or sell options, right? And you're going to hedge yourself with stock accordingly. And that is going to have an impact on volatility and the way that things are positioned. So in this case, what you see here is that the options market has a very, the Hero market has a very bullish outlook, right, to start the day, meaning this is all positive delta trades to start the day. Somebody is in here buying calls and or selling puts, right? But futures sold off hard over that exact same time frame, and you can see right around noon the flow stops and it changes, right? The Hero indicator goes flat, which tells us that whatever the start of day flow was, it stopped. So whoever's buying calls or selling, whoever's buying calls here or selling puts, stop their flow. If the Hero indicator goes sideways, that means nothing's really happening in the market, right? And whatever the futures trade was, that seemed to stop as well, and that happened right around the European close. So we think this was likely somebody shorting futures against some type of volatility trade, so they're selling puts or buying calls against as a way to express a view on volatility. Now, what's interesting is the day before this, the flow was the exact opposite. In other words, the Hero indicator is very negative, and the ES went straight up. And so what we knew about these days was somebody closed up a massive strip of in-the-money calls the day before, and the Hero indicator was negative because of that, but they bought back futures, which pushed the market higher. And then if you saw in our daily note, we could see that left this void, right? This volatility trade left this void in the market that allowed us that allows us to see that, hey, there's not that much support, and the market sort of backfilled again the following day. So if you combine this flow, what's interesting about this is if you combine this flow, even though the market is down, this hero indicator is positive. Towards the end of the day, it looks a little bit negative. It shifted a little bit negative towards the end of the day, which indicated some, maybe people are buying some puts or selling some calls. But what's fascinating about this is even though the market is down sharply, the VIX, which you can see here, this is just that last day, stayed really contained. In other words, if this market was dropping because people were buying puts, volatility would have a massive spike. But in this case, this is a 5-day chart of the S&P here and a 5-day chart of the VIX. Everything was very contained. So what I'm getting at is that, yes, this is a big sell-off in the market, and you might say to yourself, well, are people buying puts? Is there a fear trade in place? Well, this is a delta unwind, right? This is a trade unwind, and I believe that because, again, the synchronicity between the futures and the options market, right? But vol didn't break out. Excuse me. Whereas if you look at the move overnight today, the VIX went up from 20 to 25. And if we look at the hero indicator, you'll see for today, there's a different, it's very negative, right? So there's a fear trade today. So how will I, Bruce just mentioned this, right? Does this mean something for tomorrow? Well, I think it does, right? If I know that this is a long vol unwind, right, then that's a different way to play it than if I know people are buying puts and the market is scared and there's a fear trade in place. So again, for those of you who are watching the ES on a given basis, put these two together, right, with VIX or implied vol, and it starts to tell you a little bit of a story, right? And you can combine this with positioning. How did open interest change? How's gamma positioned? Excuse me. And you start to get more of a 3D picture, so to speak. And I should note that this is generally only applicable to the ES and NDX. You can see in single stocks, you can see there are volatility traders, but it tends to be more directional flow. Whereas what we've seen recently, particularly in options expiration, is this adjustment that are clearly volatility trades taking place. So the stuff that's new for everybody that I think is really exciting to watch, and for those of you who are maybe considering, hero or trying to figure out what the impacts of options is, this is really exciting. We've been gathering data for quite a while. We've been working on a way to really parse through that data, get it in the right, format, clean it, etc. And we have some really pretty cool charts to look at. So the components of hero, as we sort of outlined already, is that there's large option trades that invokes big stock volume and hedging activity, and that makes the stock move. That's the fundamental theory behind everything that goes on. So let's just take a quick look here. This is a chart of AMC for Friday. Now, there's only two things on this chart, because I want to make it very clean to look at. On the bottom is the stock's volume. So many of you are probably familiar with, volume profile, where most of a stock's volume takes place at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, right? It's that volume smile. And then in lunchtime tends to be the lowest amount of stock volume. At the top, we have the hero signal, okay? So the hero signal in this case is bucketed into is in 1 minute buckets. So what's the cumulative reading for each 1 minute reading? So if you were to basically add up all those triangles and just track them in 1 minute bucket only, that's essentially what we have. And then we have one standard deviation is a red line, and then two standard deviations is a green line. So basically the red and green lines tell us what's a big signal. So obviously, as you know, there's one massive signal here, right? So giant hero reading for AMC here. It's a negative delta reading. So somebody bought a bunch of calls or sold a bunch of puts. And then what you'll notice is, and Bruce, hopefully you can make this out, right here, right after that is a giant chunk of stock volume, right? Option trade takes place, massive stock volume takes place. And then I highlighted a bunch of other readings on here as well, that when there's a big option print associated with that, right, almost immediately these black lines are indicating that are spikes in options volume, or excuse me, spikes in stock volume. So again, huge option delta, big stock volume jump, right? So I know what you guys are all saying. Well, what does that mean for the price? So I got you. So I highlighted just on this very simple chart a red arrow where the negative delta trades are. So if the spike down, it gets a red arrow. If it's spiked up, we got a green arrow. And it's pretty revealing, right? Here is that massive trade, this first red arrow, and then here's the subsequent giant red trade, which is again a one or two standard deviation print. And so you could see clear as day here what happens, right? Big put delta trade comes in, market goes down. Around this bottom is a big green call trade, or somebody sold puts, one of the two, right? And so you can see everywhere there's a positive delta trade, a large trade, there are impacts in the market. Now, some of these trades again are through a bank desk, and I'll touch on this in a minute, where I'm going to call up, say, JP Morgan on equity derivatives desk and say, hey, I want to buy 10,000 AMC calls, in which case the bank may print their hedge first, and I'll show you an example of that in a second. And so you may see the stock move first and then the option print take off. Again, that's information for you though. But most of the time in these single stocks, you'll see what are generally option sweeps. So an algo sweeps all of the options exchanges, and then you'll see the stock move as the brokers or market makers need to adjust their exposure. So you can see the correlation here. Big option print, stock sells. A series of option negative delta prints, red arrows again, stock sells off. Big inflection point here, big options trade, positive delta trade. Someone's got to buy stock ostensibly to hedge, and up the stock goes. So you can see that these correlations between, again, these big options trades, big stock volume, and a move in the stock. So I just mentioned, calling a desk. I think most of the really big flow in the S&P goes through desks, right? You're going to call up your Credit Suisse, Bank of America, Morgan Stanley, whatever, and they're going to put the trade up where they get their hedge off first and then print the trade, right? That's how they'll tend to do it. So what we'll see here is, you notice in the S&P there's a lot of one and two standard deviation trades, but this one in particular I wanted to highlight because you can see the stock volume hits right before the hero signal picks it up. In other words, real quick, stock print, now put the option up, right? Because as the broker wants to get his hedge off before the market knows that a big trade took place. But again, the correlation is there between big option prints and big volume prints in the stock. So on this particular move here, you'll see that this is where that big stock print went up with the hero signal, because that hedge went off first. You see there's a little tick up first, and then the option print takes place. But the other interesting trade I mentioned before, algos, is that you can see it's more likely a sweeper of some kind came in, right, and hit the market with a bunch of a series of small trades over about 5 or 10 minutes. So this trade likely didn't go through a bank desk because it took place in a bunch of small pieces. And you can see that took place right at the bottom of this market here. So again, here's the red arrow where you see that there's a bunch of negative trades come in and the market sells off pretty hard. So why did the market drop here? Well, a series of negative delta trades took place. It likely had to get hedged out pretty quickly. And then you can see right at this 1351 point, which is right at this green arrow, the trade suddenly flipped to some bullish sweepers come in, and that marks a bottom in the market. So that takes place around 1351, which is somewhere in here, where you could say, it's a little bit tougher to pick up because it's not one big trade. But if you see it on a cumulative basis, which you pick up on the hero cumulative reading, you would see these inflection points that take place in the market that can mark big tops and big bottoms. One other one I want to check out, not always are there big trades, all day like in AMC. Sometimes you really just have one or two really big trades, and then it's pretty quiet the rest of the day. So I know a lot of people like to focus on some of these Bitcoin stocks. In this case, you have MARA, where you have one or two really big trades in the day that maybe you want to focus on or pay attention to. These other signals are a little bit smaller, so there's a lot of stocks to monitor, and you'll get one or two big prints that take place that give you an opportunity to interact with that options flow or possibly build some trades around it. And I highlighted, those trades here. You can see this really big one around noon. It corresponds to the minute, with a huge bottom in the stock. And then a little bit later, we have a negative delta trade. We have another positive delta trade, which doesn't create the same volume, right? Doesn't create the same push. But then nothing else really happens. And then obviously, we have these other two trades here that I highlight. on the screen. So these patterns show up with different frequency depending on the stock that you're looking at, and so that's just a key thing to note and a key thing to monitor. Yeah, as Bruce mentioned before, I'm going to show my actual screen now. Excuse me, sorry. But you can go to the Bookmap Marketplace and sign up not just for the hero indicator, but you can also sign up to our, we send out 2 daily notes every single day, as well as the on-screen hero indicator that we're talking about here. So you can subscribe to all of those services through the Bookmap Marketplace. So I'm going to switch over to the hero indicator itself. I'm happy to take any questions on the material I just presented. If you want to ask some questions about the market, if Bruce is okay with that, I'm happy to offer whatever view I may hear. I'll just say, starting off with what the flow is for today, we started the day very neutral. As you can see here, there was some bearish options flow to start. The readings will quickly get in. As you can see here, we're positive 80,000 on the hero reading right now. So there was some bearish, minus 20,000 is what we got to on the hero indicator. So some small light put flow came in, and then this has switched to be quite bullish over the day. There's clearly one very big trade that took place here, positive delta trade, and then the trend is working up now. So you can see that flow come in. These dips are getting bought at the moment, and the market is staying pretty flat right around this big combo level, which is a combination of spider option positioning and SPX. That's the way we call it, the combo. So this is a liquidity center here around this 43.70, and it looks like the options flow is sort of really centering around that level at the moment. Interesting if you want to flip over to some other single stocks too, like AMC. I mean, AMC for one is just with the hero indicator. It seems almost like, well, I talk about all the time. I'm gonna phrase this a little bit, how AMC is just controlled by options flow. I've posted tons of videos about this on my YouTube channel. You can check that out. That you could just see the options flow kick in on this thing and knock it back into place all the time. This is a primary example here. You can see right off the top at 43, the options flow just flips very, very, very bearish. You can see there's 2 big prints here, 3K, 8K, and the stock just slides lower. And then you'll see this flow will flatten out and the stock will regain its footing. So you can see these things will correspond to each other, and the options flow will lead AMC very consistently. Thing that Apple starts off pretty negative. You can see on this case, I have not gotten rid of my on-screen indicators. So you can see how overwhelming those on-screen indicators can become. So we can just come in here and make a quick adjustment. If we want to show only things of a certain size, and we can do that. So there's only been one really big trade, and that was a little bit early in the day. It looks like off the open, someone got a little bit bullish in here, and the big option print corresponds with a pretty good lift in the stock. So with that, I will take any questions if anyone has them. You can put them in the chat, I suppose, is the best way. And
Yep.
if for some reason I didn't get to what you're talking about, if you have any questions, you can reach us at info@spotgamma.com. I'm at SpotGamma on Twitter. You can get to our YouTube channel, which is YouTube/SpotGamma. And I am, again, happy to take any questions, or we can close it up, as I know the market is pretty busy today.
Yeah, we got a few questions here. And also, I know that you're putting different metrics together now, but in use case scenarios of the hero indicator, sometimes you went through a couple where the cumulative is moving down, but the market is moving up.
Correct.
And then other times it's the opposite. How, I mean, with your options background and knowledge, how do you define some of those things and some of that phenomena? Because you do define it, and you're just saying, oh, okay, this is what's going on at this point in the market.
Yeah. Well, there's really 2 ways to kind of put this together, right? So if you think back to that table where I talked about what is a positive delta trade, a positive delta trade is if someone's buying calls, right? They're buying call options or they're selling puts. If it is a negative delta trade, it means that they are selling calls or buying puts. Now, I talk about the way to measure implied volatility is just to look at the VIX. There's a lot of people, very sophisticated traders, who will probably say that's not the cleanest way, but for people who are just getting used to the options market, it's a good way on a short-term basis to measure that. So if people are buying puts, they are buying options, and that usually means that volatility is going to go up. The VIX is going to go up. So just to tell you what the VIX is, the VIX measures the price of all options that expire within 30 days, of all SPX index options that expire within 30 days. So if people are buying a bunch of puts because they're scared that the market's going to crash, the VIX goes up because people are buying puts. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so if the hero indicator is going down, if it's a negative indicator reading, but the VIX is not going up, then that's telling me that people are not buying puts, right? Because if they were buying puts, the VIX would be going up. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I can therefore intuit that traders must be selling calls to generate those negative deltas, because selling calls means they're selling options, which means that that's not going to push the VIX higher. Does that make sense?
Yep. Very clear.
So if the market, so deltas are going up today, right? The options indicator is going up today. The VIX is flat to slightly higher. If people were buying calls right now obviously this is a little tricky because when you buy calls, you're not going to have as much of an impact on the VIX, right? Because people are also going to be selling puts likely at the same time. But because the VIX is not really dropping very hard and we have positive delta readings, I view that as people are buying calls today and not really selling puts. If people are selling puts, we'd see a big drop in the VIX. Right now, the VIX is basically at the high of the day, 26, right? So if people are going to sell puts, then I would say, okay, they're not scared anymore, right? They're closing up their fear position, so to speak. But because the deltas are up, right? This is telling me people are buying calls because the VIX is also not dropping. If they were selling puts and getting out of their position, we'd have positive deltas. In other words, the hero indicator would be positive, but the VIX would be getting crushed. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So we have the FOMC tomorrow, right? And our view is that because people are worried now, is the Fed going to say taper or not? And I'm not qualified to really opine on any of that here in this session, but I will just say people are worried, right? They're concerned that this time the Fed is going to say taper, or that Evergrande is a real calamity this time, whatever it may be. People are not selling out of their puts, even though VIX is pretty flat, right? And the market is not really doing very much at the moment. And so you would expect, if there was going to be a big rally, that volatility, i.e. VIX, would get crushed, and then people will be getting out of their puts as fast as possible. Because as you know, when the market rallies hard and implied volatility or the VIX drops really hard, that means put values are getting destroyed, right? And it's a race to get out of them as fast as you can to try to save some of your money. But in this case, VIX isn't going down. Yes, we have some positive delta readings, but I think those are call buyers, right? So people buying calls is a much different thing from people selling puts. Total different risk profile, right? Because you have very defined risk if you're buying a call. That's kind of like taking a punt that you think the market's going to go higher. But the people, if you sell a put, you have much more risk on the table if the market drops, right? Because you're exposed to higher amounts of risk as the market goes down. Whereas if you sell a call, the most you're going to lose is your call premium, right? So I don't know if that was, I hope that was a sort of a helpful view of what it is I'm looking at. I should definitely write and do some videos and put some material together of, to elaborate on that, but hopefully everyone at least kind of was able to glean some of the ways that I'm looking at this order flow.
No, that was very helpful. Like a great scenario there.
Cool. Just trying to see if there's any other questions in here. What the spot game a main function where correlated with futures? I'm not entirely sure what that means, Mark. Mark, if you could elaborate on that question, that'd be helpful. A rising hero and rising VIX would mean call buyers, correct? Right. So Tim, that is more or less the way to look at it, right? But obviously, call buying, right? As in this case, I'm looking at the VIX. The VIX is again at the high, and because the hero is up, I think that was just call buyers today. So that's exactly how I would look at that. If the VIX was just getting absolutely annihilated today, and we had those positive delta readings, then I would say this is likely more a put seller, right, vol seller rally than it is a I do not have the NQ feed up, so the hero data is going to be delayed here. I can bring it up for a moment. So we'll let the hero indicator get kind of caught up with the market here, and then we can take a look at the Nasdaq. Could you use the hero indicator along with the cumulative delta? Yeah, so Daniel, I think that there are definitely people who have messaged me and sent some information about the CVD delta combined with the hero. And I think what you can see is that there will be correlations between that cumulative volume delta as well as what is happening with the options market. So we were just talking about, is it vol sellers, right? And is that why we're getting sort of positive CVD along with negative hero readings? And can you kind of put those pieces together? So I think I have not personally done a big study there. I know there are several subscribers who do compare those things and have gleaned some information from that information or from those two signals. Is there a rough minimum daily option volume that we'd use for the hero? So Daniel, another great question. So what we're doing currently is we are storing the live hero reading now in databases. So in the next 2-3 weeks, we will be able to start putting out information that tells you what should measure as a significant trade. Now, for each stock, that's going to vary a little bit, right? Because the volume profile of every stock is a little bit different. So we're going to start kind of like arming people with a little bit more information now over the next several weeks that I think will clear up sort of what is a big signal or important signal for a stock and what is not, like what you can watch for. Puneet asked, is 67K is big or small? 67K is pretty decent. Generally 6 figures, low 6 figures is kind of where the readings get to be their largest. So this is a very big trade here that took place earlier today. That's about let's see, we went from 1,800 up to 39,000. So that is a very large trade. Again, I've seen 100 or 200,000 is kind of where the entire thing will cap out. There will be a recording of this webinar, I believe. Bruce can confirm that.
Yes.
We do not, Jessica, good question. We do not track options on futures at the moment. So when you're looking at the ES call and put flow, you are seeing the SPX and SPY options flow. I've looked at the futures flow. There is, compared to the SPX and SPY, it's much, much smaller flow, and it's an entirely different data feed. So the cost is really pretty substantial to just add a little bit onto the signal, but it's something that is on the drawing board. Do I watch Hero on the VIX or the VVIX? So we watch so if you bring up the VIX futures, you will see the VIX options. I hope that answers your question on that, Todd. Can I explain on the implications of negative cumulative hero reading for individual stocks while the price is moving up? My view of that is so there's two things to really answer here. One is figuring out, is the flow substantial in a stock? In other words, we may have just had 1 or 2 put trades today, right? In AMC, I don't think that's the case for AMC, but let's take a look at Wish and see what Wish is doing. So just for example, the float in Wish, I believe, is much smaller, the stock float, than AMC, right? So we may have a negative hero reading for any given stock, but it may be negative just because only a few trades took place, right? So it's just not material. Even though it's negative, it's not material. So when you have to figure out, is it a big amount of flow that's taking place? This will be an interesting stock to watch because, as you can see here, this flow is accelerating to the downside in Wish. So it's gonna be very interesting to watch what happens to the stock in the next few minutes. So you got to kind of contextualize everything, right? Is the hero reading large, which is something that we're working on giving data to everybody to sort of help inform you of that. And then 2, what is the direction of that flow? So it's possible that there's volatility traders in particularly like big names like Apple, where there's tons of order flow, options order flow. Same thing with Tesla. I mean, there's likely to be a lot of volatility traders in Tesla as well. I mean, you look at this, you look at this order flow, and there's no question about what is going on in Tesla right now, right? This delta reading is almost as big as what's going on in the ES, and it's very bearish when you look at this. So if this was going up with the stock going down, then you would say that it's possibly a volatility trader, right? Someone shorting the stock and buying vol. So what I would expect is, the market does have a larger drawdown and volatility really spikes, you're probably likely to see a bunch of stocks where the order flow is positive and maybe that's against a short stock position. In other words, maybe I'll sell puts and then short some stock against it as a way to hedge, because I just want to short volatility, right? I don't actually want to it's not a directional view on the stock, it's a view on the volatility. So anytime I see substantial order flow, meaning substantial hero order flow, that contradicts the movement of the stock, then I'm thinking that it's probably a volatility trade and not necessarily, directional flow. And the implication of those could be different. It's also, let's also be clear on something. If traders are shorting a stock, because a Reddit board said to, and a giant fund comes in, like on our S&P rebalance day, to just buy a stock because they need to own it on their balance sheet, well, then the two signals can conflict for reasons that have nothing to do with each other, right? You can have, of course, situations wherein someone is just a big buyer of the stock, and that's irrespective of options order flow, right? So you need to make sure that those correlations are clear and intact, and obviously be aware of, are the signals corroborating, right? If we're seeing movements down in here, how are we seeing the stock react at the same time? Those kinds of things. Is the hero showing the next SPX resistance as 43.44 today? Right, so let's be clear about two things. One, the levels that you see on the left are provided from Spot Gamma, the Spot Gamma service. Those are irrespective. These levels over here have, I don't want to say nothing to do with this. There's actually some synchronization here, but the hero reading does not link directly to these levels that you see on the left. So our Spot Gamma service does show a support bar at 43.44, which I believe is Robbie's question. This 43.70 area is a big one. And then if we scroll up, you see there's a concentration of our levels quite a bit out of the money. So, this is where we would view heavy resistance in the market, up around 44.40 area, basically, if I zoom way out. So as we're kind of talking here, the order flow is a little bit positive, but what's interesting is the VIX is threatening to kind of break down, and I think that would be the fuel. If the VIX really kind of breaks back below 25 is where you really see that ramp higher in the market. What Spot Gamma main function for futures traders? So the Spot Gamma, the main function is support and resistance lines, along with volatility estimates that we are calculated from S&P options positioning. So it's a database analytics of support and resistance lines. So whether you're a swing trader or some other type of trader in futures, everyone uses the levels a little bit differently. We have a lot of options traders that like to use the levels for volatility estimates. Again, where are the big support and resistance lines? And that's what Spot Gamma provides on a daily basis. Joe asks if there's a correlation between tick and gamma info. I would imagine there is. That would be pretty interesting to look at. I have not looked at that myself. Could you put together a table of what you're saying earlier? Yes. So Puneet, great question. I'd be more than happy. I'll write that down now to put that VIX table together. So I got that written down. I will do that today for sure. Is there a way to filter on-screen hero size by standard deviation? There is actually, yes. Good question. So in the hero indicator here, there's an automatic filter here. So if you check that, you can mark it by standard deviation. So great question there, Daniel. And then last question, and we'll let everybody head off, is why do the cloud notes levels not line up exactly? So the reason is, Razor, great question. All of our data is sourced from the SPX index options. So as you know, the SPX trades at a VIG or a spread to the actual ES futures. So 43.70 is roughly 12 points equivalent to what is mapped out on the screen here of, I believe, 43.58. So that's why you see a difference between the levels. The label is in SPX terms, but it's mapped onto the futures trading price. So that's why you see a difference there.
How about the combo level?
Yeah, so the combo level is the same thing. So what we do for combo is we take the SPY options and the SPX options, we combine those together, we back out the SPX price, and then we adjust the SPX price to the futures price. So all labels are in SPX terms. That's the cleanest way to say it. They're all in SPX terms. That's what the label is, but the print, where it is printed on your chart, is at the equivalent ES price, and that spread adjusts over time. So by the time the contract rolls, that spread is usually only about 2 points. In other words, our label will only be 2 points off of the futures price. So we will leave it at that. We know it's kind of run up to the top of the hour. Again, if you have questions.
Actually,
Oh, I'm
I do,
sorry. Go ahead,
Brent.
Bruce.
I'm sorry. Can you show more information about where I can find videos and your blog and
Yeah,
articles on?
100%. Sorry about that. We'll flip back to our PowerPoint here. So this is where you can reach us. Excuse me. Again, sorry. We are at spotgamma.com. Info@spotgamma is our email. Again, we have a bunch of YouTube videos at youtube.com/spotgamma. I do a lot of stuff on Twitter as well. If anyone's there, you can catch me at spotgamma on Twitter. I'm more than happy to try and help answer any of your questions. But we have a lot of resources both on our site and on YouTube for anyone who wants to learn more about Hero or just in general some of the different ways that we view market order flow.
Yeah, maybe can you show your website and the blog and some of the videos there?
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, there's just such good content on there. So just go to the horse's mouth here, basically.
Yeah, definitely. So this is the Spot Gamma site. So when you subscribe to Spot Gamma, you have access to what we call our portal, and through there you can get access to just tons of different ways that we analyze the market. For example, if you check out the levels in the S&P 500, we produce gamma-based analysis. So where are all the biggest option strikes in the market? How do these roll on a daily basis, right? So these are indications of where the big open interest lies in the markets. Many of you are familiar with the concept of gamma and Vanna. So we produce charts that measure the amount of gamma and Vanna in the market, and then we explain to you every morning what the impact of these different positions are, right? So we don't just say, here's what gamma is for the day. We tell you exactly what the impact of that should be in the market. We also have a tool called the Equity Hub, which allows you to analyze the stock, the options position for over 3,000 different stocks. So that's the tool that we have on screen here now. So you can use this in conjunction with the Hero indicator. So for example, in AMC, if I bring that up, you can see where most of the options are positioned. You can see when the bulk of those positions expire. And the impact that has on the stock is detailed in our blog. We have tons of different resources on our blog that explain how different traders. So many of you may be familiar with Doug Pless, for example. He posted some great charts on here of how he takes advantage of using our different metrics to trade for himself, right? So there's a couple of great recent posts from him, as well as some other contributors that outline how to use all these tools, right? How to add them to your existing trading style, right? I think the key here is we're not trying to offer you a trading style. We're not trying to tell you how to trade. We're simply saying, what is your strategy? And you can overlay this options data on top of that, right? Do what you're comfortable with, but just consider what the options positions are and make addendums or adjustments to your existing strategy when these big options levels come into play.
Okay, and just one more comment. It looks like I didn't want to bypass Omar here. He was asking for, or he had a suggestion to show on chart, on screen triangle of delta instead of the overall kind of aggregation. I know it's in the subchart, but he was actually or suggesting to see it on chart as well.
That's what the triangle is, I believe. Is that what he's?
I thought the triangle was the individual transaction of where that took place.
Yeah, so for example, here I highlighted only the largest trade so far for the ES, and so you can scroll back here, and this is part of why it's so great to have this book map. Is you save a recording of this data, right, and you can zoom in and say what happened here, right? What was that really big trade that we were talking about earlier, and I can zoom in on that and see exactly what the market did at that time. Right, you can see that impact, right there. So I'm not sure if this is what Omar's getting at, but I believe Bookmap and the Hero indicator can do what he's asking for. But please correct me
Okay.
if that's
Okay.
not right.
I was a little confused myself, and I wrote him, replied to him there as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that being said, we're open to any and all suggestions. You can send them over info@spotgamma.com. We love to take feedback and help consistently, constantly improve our products.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Brent. Doug Pless is actually going to be presenting on Friday. He's going to be going through some of his hero options and some of the spot gamma levels as well in his strategies. So
Yep.
yeah,
And
everyone, you have
the
the link
Yeah,
for.
I want to mention David Blake as well. David is a contributor for us. I know he's active in the bookmap community. He's posted a lot of great content pieces as well. How he uses the hero indicator and this other pieces of information to trade. So, um, you can check out his work as well.
Yeah, lots of great stuff from David as well. He presented last Pro Trader webinar, and we'll have him again though. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that to see someone else's strategy, you will see Doug on Friday. It's the same link that you use for this webinar here. It'll just be at Friday at 10 a.m. All right,
Great.
so yeah, thank you very much, Brent, and really interesting stuff as always. And we will have the recording up later this afternoon, probably in about 2 or 3 hours.
Thanks, Bruce. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I thank everyone for coming on this very volatile day.
All right, thank you very much, Brent. Take
Thank
care.
you.